a little bit about how social enterprises can become a bit more circular through reuse, repair, and recycling. As a network, we work with mainly social enterprises in that area. And our vision is a world where the word waste doesn't exist, and where the whole community benefits from the environmental, social, and economic impact of reuse. And what I think that really underlines is the connection between social and circular, as well as the economy, of course. So just to, I suppose, explain a bit what we mean by the circular economy. For those of you not familiar, some on the call are very familiar. Sorry, hold on a second. There's the diagram on the next slide. It'll pop up any second now. Here we are. On the left-hand side, illustrating this idea of the circular economy. And what it's really about, as you can see from the purple box around to the right, is it's about trying to design out waste, try to rethink how we consume and decouple growth from the current overconsumption of resources. And it's about trying to keep goods like tables and computers and clothes, all the stuff that we use every day in home and in businesses, as well as materials like cardboard and plastic and metal through recycling in the economy for as long as possible. And in this diagram on the bottom right-hand side in green, you can see where reuse fits in, reuse and repair, and then round to recycling. And while I guess a lot of people might think about the circular economy as about reducing how much waste we produce, it's actually very much about trying to reduce how much raw materials we consume. And that's what you can see on the top left-hand side there, because that's where I suppose the real environmental impact and the social impact is. The estimates are that around 50% of all global greenhouse gas emissions are associated with the extraction and production of raw materials. So by doing, I suppose, reuse and repair and recycling, we're trying to reduce the raw material input. And it plays into these 4 sustainable development goals that you can see on the right-hand side. First of all, by keeping goods locally and trying to repair and refurbish and recirculate them, we're able to create jobs. And there's lots of statistics around how many jobs the circular economy can create, but we'd use a rough estimate of about 300 jobs per ton of material handled are created through reuse, as opposed to 6 jobs per ton handled for landfill. So it has a huge knock-on impact on jobs. And not only that, but a lot of those operating in this space at the moment are social enterprises and are creating opportunities for people from marginalized backgrounds or long-term unemployment that might not otherwise have access. And that's why there's a strong connection at the moment between social and circular. Reuse and repair and responsible consumption are very much at the heart of Sustainable Development Goal 12. In terms of Sustainable Development Goal 13 on climate action, as I mentioned, what we use every day has a huge upstream impact in terms of raw materials and production. And if you just take textiles alone, because that's very kind of topical at the moment, clothing that we buy, the textile industry is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than all aviation and shipping combined. So it has a huge impact. And if we're able to try and reuse and buy pre-loved clothes more, then we can try and take climate action in that way. And then finally, SDG 17 I put in because becoming more circular is about a cultural and behavioral change, as well as changing policy and access to reuse. And so we do all need to work together and help create and support that cultural change. And actually, there's been a bit of a cultural shift during COVID, as I'm sure you're all aware. People are more kind of conscious of what they have and use, and you know, started to repair at home, and would like to see that continue for sure. So just to give a few examples of reuse, it's kind of useful to look at reuse through the lens of everyday activities. And I have, sorry, just holding on. Oh, waiting for that to move on. This just shows, for example, in your everyday office space, all the different kinds of reuse that you can, you know, I suppose include as part of your everyday workspace. So you reuse includes everything from extending the lifespan of something through good maintenance and repair and upcycling, as well as optimizing how much use something gets. And just as an example, a household drill on average is used for only 15 minutes of its lifespan, because you know, you're not drilling, I suppose, all the time. But if that could be shared, if you could pass it on for onward sale or secondhand use afterwards, if you can borrow a drill, then it helps to maximize the use of something, and also reduce how many people have to buy drills. You can also see there a reusable cup, so it also applies to sort of, I suppose, the food and packaging that we use. So in addition to the broad range of or scope of activities, there's also a really broad scope of goods that we talk about in this area. Everything from food, and some of you will be familiar with Food Cloud, who redistribute surplus food from retailers onto charities for people in need, to furniture, of course, secondhand and upcycled furniture members, for example. In Cork, we have Duhallow Revamp, who provides furniture and refurbishes furniture for low-income families. I know Rediscovery Centre is on the line as well. They also upcycle furniture and sell it on in Dublin. Clothes, we have the Charity Shops Association, who have 450 retail charity outlets across the country. And that's an absolutely huge, I suppose, throughput of secondhand clothes. We have electrics and IT, for example. Rehab takes computer donations from corporates and refurbishes them and sells them back onto charity. Mattress recycling with social enterprises in Dublin, Eco Mattress, and in Galway with Bounce Back, taking out, I suppose, springs and other useful components from mattresses for recycling. I mentioned reusable cups. We have Conscious Cup campaign, trying to get people to reuse cups, especially to show how safe it is to reuse cups even at this time. We have bicycles with a bicycle repair member in Cork, Cork Community Bikes, who helps show people how to repair bikes, as does Rediscovery Centre here in Dublin. Media, we have an online member called Thriftify, who puts books and CDs as well as fashion online from charity shops. Even building materials can be reused, and we've got a member, Habitat for Humanity, opening in Dublin soon, who'll be selling everything, including the kitchen sink. Nappies, Cloth Nappy Library has a lending service for families wanting to test out cloth nappies. And the image at the end is just a catch-all for everything else. It only is limited by imagination, and Recreate, one of our members working with creative reuse, has a lot of imagination as well. So that's just to give you, I suppose, a flavor, and hopefully help you think about all of the materials and goods that you work with all the time, and how you might be able to either source or pass them on for reuse. So, oh, there we are there. So I guess, sorry, I've gone ahead a bit too quickly. I guess in terms of what organizations can do, certainly since COVID has happened, there's been a lot of people at home decluttering, and we've seen a huge influx of donations to some of our members and charity shops and so on, of sort of unwanted textiles and furniture and all kinds of things. And while that's really positive, we also want to encourage people to think about what happens after something's been donated, and the fact that we need to close that loop and encourage more people and organizations to think about prioritizing secondhand goods and buying secondhand over new. So the next time you make a purchasing decision, you know, can you get that thing from a secondhand source? Can it be upcycled? Can you find a second life example of that item? And it not only helps the environment, but also can be very cost effective. I have an image here on the right hand side of a project that we ran last year, and it was actually, I think, one of Ireland's first green and public procurement projects. It was very exciting, down in Tullamore with the public body, the National Waste Collection Permitting Office, and actually Collaboration Ireland worked with us on that project too. And that was to supply 100% of the office furniture in a new office space as secondhand And what you can see there, every single item of furniture in that picture is either secondhand or upcycled, so 100% reused. And by doing this project with our members, we supported social enterprises as well. So it was a really nice example of how circular and social can go hand in hand. But in addition to that, and I suppose just to point out, a lot of the furniture items, especially the office furniture that we sourced, was actually donated for free from, you know, big companies or universities doing clearances. And so it is and can be, you know, a really cost-effective way for social enterprises to find the things that they need. The other way to not only reuse but also save money is to share things, I guess, between each other and to collaborate. As I mentioned, the average drill is only used for 15 minutes in any household. So I suppose, you know, if you're running events or doing things where you need something only for temporary use, can it be shared? And also what you have, I suppose, can it be repaired, and can you give things an onwards life? And, you know, honestly, for our office space, we've received so much through these share platforms, free platforms like Free Trade. We have our printer, which was donated to us. So, and a lot of stationery as well. So there's a lot of ways, I guess, even in small steps, to bring reuse into your office space. And then finally, I just put joined up thinking. I mentioned earlier Sustainable Development Goal 17, that we really do need to be working together to try and create this cultural change and really support behavioral change towards reuse. It's not a nice to have. Circular economy is essential, particularly as part of this Green New Deal. And we want to see it part of our everyday decision making. It crosses so many different areas, from the purchases we make, as I've talked about, to the events that we run, and even alleviating food poverty, as I mentioned, with Food Cloud, or alleviating even everyday poverty with low-cost household goods. So it is on all of us, I think, to work together to support each other in this sector, as we well know, and as these calls have really highlighted. And going circular can do that, as well as contributing to the bottom line. So that's a real, I suppose, snapshot of 3 simple ways to try and become more circular, and to help, I suppose, find where you can source secondhand goods and second life goods, or even share. There are sharing platforms as well, or where to go to get things repaired. The next slide is all about the resources and links. So sorry, I'll just wait for that to move on. Doesn't like me today. There it is there. So we have our own directory of members. You can look up at crni.ie/directory. That's for individuals looking for things. For bigger projects and procurement, we also have a procurement page, reuse, repair and recycling procurement. We also have a directory of members and where they are in terms of COVID and reopening on the COVID-19 page. And there's lots of toolkits and ideas and inspiration there as well. The EPA worked with the Wheel on a toolkit as well for communities that some of you might be familiar with on sustainable communities. And there are some other tips on becoming more circular in there as well. Stop Food Waste has an excellent website and helps with ideas on how to reduce food waste. There's festival ideas from the LAPN down at the bottom, Green Year Festival. Of course, My Waste is a go-to resource for recycling information and tips, and they'll be sharing a lot of information in October about Reuse Month, which is a really important month every year for highlighting different ways to reuse, and for, you know, free workshops and ideas on how to reuse. There's a national repair directory, Repair My Stuff, and this zero waste directory as well on where to go to buy things with minimal packaging. So that said, these slides I think will be shared, or we can share them, or get in touch with us and we'll share them with you. Or get in touch with us at any time. We're really interested in, you know, how we can help the sector become more circular and connect you in with some of the members that we work with. I'm 5 minutes fast.
Good Lord, I wouldn't
How's
expect
that?
that at all. That's amazing. Just those details, check out crni.ie. So we're going to put that into the chat for everybody. I'm going to take down the screen share for the moment. And I've got some questions for you. By the way, anybody, we are not looking for you to say the questions. If you could put them into the chat, that would be great. I do have one question. They missed the name of the enterprise for the recycling building materials.
Yeah.
Can you just mention that one again?
Yeah, Habitat for Humanity. They haven't actually opened in Dublin yet, but they have 4 stores in Northern Ireland called Restore, and they sell literally kitchen sinks, doors, tiles, fittings, all kinds of other things. There is also in the Rediscovery Centre an excellent paint reuse program. So if it's paint that you're after, that's actually available in Dublin.
That is excellent. Thank you very much. So the Rediscovery Centre, I know, are on the call as well. I'm sure they can speak to all these things. I do have one from Catherine from Melrower, the bike recycling in Galway, with a question. And Claire, just wondering what you see as the main regulatory barriers to growing the circular economy, increasing reuse, etc. I know that's the question that keeps you up at night, Claire. And
yeah, I think first of all, we need to make reuse more accessible and cost effective. That's the big long-term goal for us. And I think one immediate policy change that we can make to help with that is to set targets. So we've been working in the background on looking at how can we actually measure all of the activity from all of the different types of reuse that I've just described, which is a mammoth undertaking, as you can imagine. How can we actually measure that? And if we can measure it, and as we can measure it, then we can set a baseline and we can actually set targets. And I think for Ireland, that would be ultimately very possible and necessary, because once you've got targets, as we've seen for renewables, as we've seen for recycling, then you actually have to back them up and support them. And then we'd see real change for this sector.
I know that there's so many areas and angles that you can go down, and procurement being one of them, and there's so many other areas that I know we've been working on with you guys as well in our own different space.
Excellent stuff.
Sorry,
can I get a coffee sometime, Louis?
Oh, Liam, I think you're unmuted there accidentally. So we've got a number of other things. I've got some other questions there, but I've just got one or two myself. You mentioned about things that social enterprises can do, Claire. Just to go back over those again, there was really about identifying opportunities for people where they can see where they can upcycle, or where they can reuse, or they can recycle, or they can just use a product or a service that they know is going to be around for a while. Is there any kind of maybe one or two maybe quick examples of how social enterprises now can make that as a change in their daily lives? You know, is there sort of maybe one or two practical examples of where that's happened? I know you mentioned one or two in the thing, but
I guess it varies so much depending on what type of service you provide and where you're working. Obviously we're all probably more working at home at the moment, so that's changed again. But you know, it's everything from, I suppose, looking at your purchasing policy if you have one, or looking at how you buy things or how you run events, which is not happening at the moment, and making sure that whenever you're using goods or products, or having to source goods or products, that that they can be secondhand. So everything from, if you're running an event, to make sure that you can have reusable cups, for example, and there are ways to source those. There's Refill Ireland is doing it, which is for water. You know, if you're looking for computers or moving into offices and you need furniture, to try and find other ways to do that. So look at the directory that we have, for example, or look at the free, you know, websites for exchange to see, can you source things from there? We absolutely encourage as well people to pass things on for reuse. As I mentioned, there's a lot of decluttering, and we really would like to see that, you know, if it's still reusable, that go into the reuse sector as opposed to being disposed of. So it's about ins and outs, any goods in, goods out, and thinking about, you know, how can you be part of the loop when you're looking at the ins and outs.
Sure. So like only if you're doing manufacturing to make sure that your offcuts and all the other stuff, they have a purpose that lead beyond, because it's okay to manufacture and to do things. It's just doing so sustainably,
Yeah.
and making sure that the products that you make are going to last beyond the extra time.
Absolutely. And if you're designing things, you know, if you have anything to do with design, to keep in mind, you know, the end of life of something. So if you're designing something, can you design it to be reused? Can you design it to be repaired? Can it be designed to be recycled at the very end? Yeah.
So use good quality materials that you think are going to be able to sustainably harvested or used in the first instance, because we're all part of this thing of consumption, and consumption is fine. We need things to live and to breathe and to act and to do all those great things, but we also need to make sure that we keep an eye on that. Is there any examples that you have from like other areas that you think might best apply here to Ireland? Is there other things that you think that we could do here in Ireland that would be good, that you'd like to see more of?
Yeah, loads of things, but we're actually very good in some areas. I think Ireland is an excellent culture, for example, of has a good culture of secondhand. You know, the charity shops as one particular type of secondhand retailer is actually extremely widespread, and we actually have quite a big throughput of clothes through that channel, and people are really engaged in donating to charity shops. And obviously a lot of people also shop there because the throughput is huge, and they don't have that in other member states. So actually we're in quite a good position in that way. On the other hand, I'd say where we're lacking, you know, we have a lot of potential for, you know, building materials, for more reuse of fittings from buildings when things are being deconstructed. More reuse of paint is an absolutely great area that could be grown, and I know Rediscovery Centre is working on that. And also one area I think is really lacking here is our electrical and electronic equipment. At the moment, if you're sending your old fridge or your old washing machine back when you buy a new one, absolutely everything goes for recycling. So at the moment, there's no way for anyone to jump in and say, actually, you know, this is still a working machine, or it only needs a tweak to be working, and therefore I could take it out of and repair it and sell it back on. There's none of that happening in Ireland at the moment, and I think that's a real shame, and we're trying to work on some policies that might help see that happen. But you know, electricals have a huge impact as well.
And I know there's so the regulations that Europe is supposed to be introducing to be able to make sure that these are compulsorily fixable, and that it's cheaper to fix it than it is to replace it, which is the current situation. They will have knock-on effects, but there's, you know, we can do an awful lot in the meantime to be able to prevent that. I'm getting an awful lot of private chats, which is great. So I might see if I can get those in together, but I have some public chats here from Duncan. Claire, following last year's project with the NWCPO, which is the project that you'd mentioned, and the government circular, have you seen any further green social clauses in public tenders coming up, and have your members maybe availed of those? Or
what I have seen is a lot of tenders, especially for furniture, broken down into small lots, and that does help, I guess, for social enterprises to engage because the scale is manageable. So I have seen quite a lot of that, and I did see the word sustainable on one of the lots in an e-tender that came out earlier this year, which was very exciting because it's the first time I've ever seen that.
Well, do you know, I'm just going to interrupt maybe because I've just realized that maybe I'm speaking here in talk. Can we maybe break down what we mean by procurement and like what does that mean to have clauses? Like what at the most basic level, I'm coming from Mars. What does it mean to have these clauses in procurement? And what, you know?
I'm definitely not a procurement expert, Chris, but like this, I suppose the kind of mantra I'd be working by at the moment is you know, you can facilitate social and these especially in this area in circular economy, by just making public tenders or in any form, you know, from request for quotations, which is below €25,000 or above €25,000 through tenders, making them accessible by making them smaller. and or being flexible about how I suppose people apply to them. So for the Tullamore project, that the furniture project, that was a request for quotation. So the value of the project was below 25,000, and they accepted a consortium response, which meant that we could bring together a number of suppliers, including our members, to provide all the furniture, because no one reuse organization would have been able to deliver that. But in terms of other projects that I've seen through e-tenders, so the bigger projects, it's really encouraging to have more and more lots, the smaller packages within each tender that people can reply to, I guess.
If the government are going for tenders, or anybody, a private company in it, they're going out to tender for anybody, they can say, show us for time, value, quality, all those things, but also demonstrate how you will include circular principles, how you'll be socially and environmentally good. And you can then mark that tender based on those responses, as well as cost and all those other things that are important. So social enterprises have two opportunities. They can go in and win those tenders if they're at a particular size that they can tender for, but also if social enterprises are building a building, or if they're looking for 50,000 euros worth of materials or whatever, they can include those clauses in their tenders as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah.
Smaller lots is obviously better. So if it's 10K, yeah, it's probably more likely for a social enterprise to win that and demonstrate and all the rest of it. That's really good.
Still evolving, I think, as you say. We haven't seen a lot of examples of green yet, but it's yeah. We'll see what it really looks like.
Cool. Very quick one. I wonder, does anybody know, this is from Mairead, anybody know where people can dispose of mattresses and beds in Cork?
There used to be a mattress recycling enterprise in Cork. Unfortunately, it closed down last year. So now some of that is going up to Galway, Bounce Back in Galway. But yeah.
Or Eco Mattress in Dublin, is they?
Yeah,
yeah. As well?
I think they might be, yeah, indeed, yes.
We should wait. These things, they come around, but yeah, good ideas never die. I've got another one. So Emma is just saying, thanks very much for the update and sustainability criteria. Clearly, we don't talk enough about it. So Jane, we design and make costumes for hire. When a costume has come to the end of its life, we revamp it and turn it into something else. We also run kids craft camps. Everything we use at the camp is recycled. We also do upcycle of small pieces of furniture for adult upcycle classes. This is something we try to promote. However, it is hard to get supplies in the west of Ireland. We did have a place run by Western Care in Castlebar, however, it no longer operates the service. Do you know any places in Mayo to get supplies? I love this question and everything about it. Thank you very much, Jane. I am dying for my dinosaur costume I've been promised for ages.
Brilliant. I'd love to hear that kind of thing. Absolutely 100% an example of what I was just talking about. I unfortunately don't know of any similar type projects over there, but I know Recreate is doing more and more sort of deliveries and working with more organizations now to share the resources they do have for creative reuse. And I know they're planning to open in more locations in the coming months, but at the moment I'm not aware of any. But please do reach out to us, and I can see what I can connect you in with as well.
I think this is a good idea where networks happen. And so I fully understand, Jane, that is, you're trying to do the best by that. And so you're trying to make sure that you've got as many opportunities to use recycled materials and upcycle materials. Clodagh O'Reilly should be on this call, who is always on every call. So I'm not 100%, something must have gone seriously wrong this morning that she's not on the call. That has good connections over in Galway as well and might be able to help if you don't already know. But I'm sure there are other ways that we might be able to connect. Jane, really appreciate that. We will connect with you after this, and we'll try and make sure that you get more supplies on
just
that.
As I think of it too, I mean, it's absolutely incredible what people will be stockpiling in their house or business when you're looking for something. I've given away bags of wine bottle corks on adverts for free. I've given away
you have a lot of them.
It took a long time to collect them, of course. I get parcels from Australia. I'm Australian, so my parents send me parcels, and I keep all the bags, the padded bags. And I had so many one day, I put them all up on WeShare, which is a free share platform, and someone took all of that plus all the bubble wrap and other packaging I had, because they have a business where they need to send stuff out and it saves them money. So I think, you know, if you are looking for anything specific, there are umpteen platforms where you can post it on Facebook or local community groups or free trade. WeShare is more Dublin oriented, or adverts free sites as well. And it's amazing what people have.
But the idea here is to try to make a conscious effort of figuring out what material, if you're a social enterprise manager, what materials you need day to day and how you're using them and what offcuts you have. And ultimately your whole thing, and I agree, and I think every social enterprise should be there, is to have zero waste. Nothing should be going into any waste paper bucket. That's the ultimate goal. So if we can prevent it from coming in at the start, then we'll prevent it from having to spend money at the end. That's kind of where we're at with the whole project. That's
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the really effective ways of advertising that Stop Food Waste came up with is to put a value on wasted food, because waste means, of course, that, you know, you didn't eat it, or you didn't value the, you know, you spent money on something and it ended up in the bin without being used. And I suppose if you can think of it in that way.
And what a great story to tell. If you manage to get rid of your bins because you're so good, that would be just an incredible thing. But can I just ask, I'm getting an awful lot of private messages. Some are personally aimed at me, which is great. One of the things, in a positive way, I mean, so many ridiculousness. A couple of things though, plastic has come up in the questions. Obviously, you know, you do your thing and you want to do your best, and, you know, you make your stuff. I'm not going to take Jane as an example here, but let's say you're making costumes and you want to ship them out, but then the only way to protect them is plastic. You know, we still have these little things that prevent us from, what is your response to people who honestly want to do their best, but stumble across these issues which they feel are insurmountable?
Yeah, I think it's about baby steps and trying to find the one or two things that work for you. As I said earlier, in terms of policy, we're trying to find, how do you make reuse more accessible and how do you make it more cost effective? And we know it's not at the moment. It is hard if you're in Galway and you're not near a Recreate Centre to find those resources. So, you know, once you find one or two pathways or ways to do things differently, then you can kind of continue with that and build on it, and then you can add another or another or another. But I think every effort is really important and appreciated. Yeah,
And
so it's hard. Yeah.
So try and make sure that if you know that you're going to have to use something which you know might not necessarily be the best environmentally, try and at least balance it with something that's,
yeah, or you know,
reduced.
You might find a way to do it. Like I said, with packaging, you know, sometimes people have used envelopes that can be repurposed, or there might be a different type of protective material that you can use to stop things from breaking in the post. If that's, you know, how you're doing things, you might just make one of those steps, you know, rather than trying to do everything at once, which I think can be a bit overwhelming, you know. Or if you're trying to shop with less plastic, you might switch or go to one of the, you know, refill type shops now that you can get everything dispensed in big bulk kind of bags. Or if you can't do that, you might just switch from, you know, plastic to glass. Just do one small thing, switch, you know, how you buy your peanut butter from plastic to glass. Like there's lots of different ways of doing it, I guess. And I suppose it always comes across like you have to take on everything at once, but I think it helps just to do one thing at a time, take baby steps.
Claire, I know that if you do these things and the types of managers that measure their social, their people, planet, profits. So it's not just looking at the balance sheet at the end of the year and cutting costs and adding revenue. And it's not just about people who are employing people who are socially excluded or marginalized or wouldn't have had a job normally, or doing something which is impactful for their community. But there is that, you know, the planet is everything. You know, it'll get us in the end if we're not careful. Is there any sort of way that, is there any, apart from chatting to yourselves or ourselves or anybody, ways to maybe have a first stab at measuring your environmental impact? Is there any ways that people can easily do that on a one-pager? Or
yeah, well, if you're able to reuse things, there's a really nice carbon calculator online. that I'll have to send the link to. I can't share my screen, can I? Where you can just pop in what you've reused or what you've, say bought secondhand, for example, and it'll calculate the impact of that as opposed to buying new. So you can kind of show through that way. As I said, there's such a huge variety of different things you can reuse. It depends on what it is, but do get in touch with us otherwise, and we'll see if we have some metrics that are useful. The carbon conversion is the key one though, I think.
Carbon conversion. So I'm coming now to the last question, I think, because I did say that I wanted you guys to be going at a quarter to. Roisin Markham, which I think is a great question. Hey, Claire and Chris, how much is reuse and zero waste being reported at board of management level or part of organizational strategic development, and what incentives are driving change in behavior? So that's a really good question. If it's not being reported, if you're not measuring it, then it doesn't exist, right?
Absolutely. I think at the moment, like we work with business in the community a bit and try to share, some of the work that our members are doing and, updates on circular economy. And we still very much get the sense that businesses are thinking about recycling, buying recycled paper, but it still doesn't really go a lot beyond that. It of course depends on every business. We're seeing encouraging things from the cafe industry, for example, supporting conscious cups and the uptake and reuse of coffee cups. But then there's a whole lot of other stuff that's still really not being thought of. And I think part of it is just that level of awareness and what options there are. How can you reuse and repair and as part of your everyday business. I think that's really hard, but I certainly haven't seen any zero waste reporting outside of our members and immediate circles. So would like to see a bit more. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. So we are coming up to this, Claire. I suppose the last things for me is just to say thank you so much. We are going to give this presentation out, but if you need it in advance, please do contact myself or Claire. The email addresses are there, and I think maybe Claire might add it to the chat while we're speaking as well. Claire, thank you so much for coming along today. There's 50 more areas I'd love to speak to you about. Gillian, first time joining, wonderful talk. I really forward to more in the future. So thank you very much. We really appreciate that. These are only meant to be of use. If they're not of use, don't join. We are sincerely trying to make sure that we're talking about things that matter. To do that as well, we run webinars and we also run check-ins, and our next check-in is next Tuesday. We're delighted to have you along, and we have the Social Enterprise SoSent IRL Hour on Twitter. I'm just about to share my screen before I say thank you to everybody. Roisin, I'd love to talk to you about B Corp. Absolutely. We could talk about B Corp on another session. I have that all lined up. We have plenty more things to discuss. I want to sincerely thank Claire for coming along today. Claire, I know you probably switched off your microphone, but are you still there?
Yes, sorry. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming along. Everybody else, really appreciate it. Again, we do Social Enterprise check-ins fortnightly every other Tuesday. Our webinar, which we have this Tuesday, is going to be now next in a fortnight. Please do join our Social Enterprise Network. If you find that we're doing something of value, please do consider joining us. We do need the support to help you guys to make sure that you are the best that you can be. We run the National Social Enterprise Helpline, so do check that out. Log on to sosent.ie for more information. Check out our Twitter hour tomorrow, #SoSentIRL. Contact us, info@sosent.ie. And we are going to do more local networking groups. We've got another one with Mayo, and we're setting up Kerry at the moment. I know that came up on the call in the private chat, so we're looking forward to maybe more updates on those things. We are thankful for everybody who has joined us on the chat today. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And looking forward to seeing you next week. Enjoy your lunch.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.